Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Sprague from Persimmon Health. I am a serial entrepreneur working on healthcare technology that helps more people access better quality of care. This podcast is for the movement of innovators, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and thought leaders that are advancing the American healthcare system through digital health. In this podcast, we highlight real stories of innovators and enablers of digital health, their opportunities, challenges, and learnings for innovation. We'll cover topics such as startup building and fundraising, entrepreneurship, emerging technologies, and big ideas to transform healthcare. We invite you to participate in this community, share your stories, and accelerate the movement. Thank you. We have an awesome pod. Enjoy. Hello, digital health community. Today, I'm thrilled to have our guest, João Bocas, one of, if not the premier experts on wearables and digital health. João is CEO and co-founder of Digital Salutem, a digital transformation and marketing firm for healthcare organizations. João is also one of the biggest personalities and influencers around digital health, and in particular, wearables, where he has thousands of subscribers on his YouTube channel, gives keynotes and publishes articles around the future of digital health and emerging technology. He is also an advisor with several startup incubator programs, and we'll be talking about wearables, influencing, and of course, startups. João, welcome to the podcast. Did I miss anything with that intro?
No, I think you covered more or less everything, Chris. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Well, thank you very much. So you are a wearables expert and one of the world's top digital health influencers. But I'm curious, what interested you and what interests you so much about digital health and wearables specifically?
Oh, brilliant. Chris, I always say I have two passions. One, sport and health. They go hand in hand because, sporting behaviors and activity behaviors lead to health behaviors. But I actually entered the technology industry by accident, not an accident, but I explained to you. I've been in healthcare for over 25 years, and I worked the last 15 years in corporate health. And then I started doing a startup with another person. He was more a technology guy, and we had this big vision of creating a big data acquisition platform and have wearables to bring the data in and then do predictive analytics and everything. And back then, it was quite a while ago, back in 2015. But prior to that, I was already collaborating with some health tech startups from the Nordics, from Finland. And they had like odometers and they had platforms to employee well-being and employee programs. This agenda has been very topical for several years. And then I discovered wearables. And I started using wearables from the beginning, from the first Fitbit, brands they're not around anymore, like Misfit and everything, and then Polar from Finland. Finland really have a pedigree in wearable brands, and so I've been following this revolution for quite some time, and then I start using them and testing them. My desk at home and at work is full of wearables. I've been doing a number of things with wearables, so yeah, and I'm very interested in performance. I was in professional sport for a number of years. I like the insights around the human body, the performance, the improvement, and of course, the overall health picture.
Right. Which sport did you play, João?
Primarily football. I mean, soccer, as they say in US. But I was also a runner, and I started doing triathlons in my 40s. So, and since I was a child, I was always very active. I played basketball and volleyball. I was into athletics and football, soccer.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, very cool to learn. So where are we at today in terms of the state of wearables and this confluence of technology that seems to be about ready for prime time, and then all of these other emerging technologies like AI and medical devices? Where are we at in healthcare delivery using those in 2022? Would love for you just to give us an overview of the landscape.
Yeah, sure. I believe in terms of the digital health industry, I call the industry because my vision is that the digital health will absorb the traditional healthcare industry and bring all these elements together, medtech, wearables, virtual care. So I call it digital health, the overall arch of the industry. But regards to your question, in terms of wearables, I think we are at the very, very beginning of the journey in terms of implementation in the industry. And the industry was maturing for quite some time and is still maturing. Actually, we talk about wearables for many, many years, but I only feel that things starting to happen right now. I believe the pandemic played a big role there, but also companies are trying to find an advantage to use data, to create new business models, to remote patient monitoring, patients, home care, hospital at home. So all these things go naturally into the direction of wearables, because wearables are a perfect vehicle to make this happen in terms of acquiring data from the human being and also have this capability of doing things on a remote and continuous level. So I see a big improvement, especially in the last 12 months. Companies are very keen to try things out, but also they see the need to really innovate and try things out. No one wants to be left behind. And I believe wearables will play a crucial role in the healthcare delivery of the future.
Right. What are some of those barriers to adoption of wearables that you've observed? So I mean, the wearables have been around a while, like you mentioned, since the Fitbit days, but they haven't yet taken over the world yet, right? You're saying we're still at the beginning of this hyper adoption cycle. What is anything that's standing in the way of becoming more mature or becoming more used in care delivery programs or monitoring programs?
Well, Chris, that's a fantastic question. I actually just shared on my LinkedIn. As you know, I'm very active on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter primarily. I just shared on LinkedIn a recent study by the American Heart Association that states the uptake on using wearables is very low for those we need it the most. And usually people that use wearables and engage well with wearables are people that already develop some health behaviors. It's naturally for active people to try to maintain that level of health and wellness, and those who need it the most actually have perceived barriers to enter and to use and engage with wearables. And a long time, a few years ago, I've done a report, about a 159 pages report on health wearables engagement, and there are top 5 device-related barriers and top 5 user-related barriers. And the user-related barriers, the lack of intrinsic motivation. What does actually motivate you to use a wearable? Is it your activity data? Is you're sleeping, or you try to lose weight? You're trying to change your health behavior? You need to manage a chronic disease. You actually need to use a wearable, for example, in terms of the diabetes management. You have to use a wearable. You have to use a medical device as such. What is it? If there is no intrinsic motivation, the engagement will not be there, and no engagement, no data, no value. The second perceived barrier that we encounter is privacy or security concerns. People are actually concerned about the intrusion, about finding personal data about them. Now there are acts and cybersecurity acts all the time. Also, within the industry, there is a lot of noise about big companies, and including pharma. Is a lot of speculation about selling health data, using the data in non-appropriate ways. So the third barrier that we encounter was human errors of forgetfulness. We all know that wearables have low battery issues. If we forget to charge them, how many times I left my wearable on the top of the fridge without battery, and just to use a few days later or even weeks later. So if we break that behavior, is very difficult to come back. But also losing the device and the sense of no value, which correlates to the first item about the lack of intrinsic motivation. Many users don't see the value in using wearables. They might use it for a few months, but then they might think, actually, why am I doing this? And nothing is changing, because everything takes time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'm curious what we do about that, because we've been talking to a lot of wearable startups too. And what they said, the hard reality the industry has learned is, look, patients don't wake up every day wanting to be engaged, right? They just naturally want to go about their lives. And for the same reasons that you mentioned of motivation or privacy, or just they don't want one other thing that they have to remember to do each day. I'm curious, what are there any innovative solutions or people trying new things in particular for like that motivation or forgetfulness type of problem?
Yeah, I would say it's possible to address some of the barriers by one of the things that we found in a study was in terms of device-related barriers, interoperability was a big one to get the data to the different system or to share the data, but also the lack of personalization. Most wearables in the marketplace are manufactured for the masses. They give you the same health data, uniformity, but also the lack of support and direction is really a big thing. Sometimes, if you buy a wearable, for example, Chris, you know you have the warranty, you have the specification, you have the setup, you download the app, you have all this guidance. But actually, there is very little guidance and support in terms of the user-related piece. Sometimes, I mean, this is very, very basic, but make sure you charge the wearable, for example, a few days or a few hours. Have a behavior charging every week or every day. Also, addressing the person need. Everyone is different, and there is no direction or personalization in terms of guidance. I think the guidance piece is extremely important. I've seen recently one of the leading wearable brands buying a coaching health startup because the coaching piece, we need the change of behavior with the technical side and the support. And the support in many cases, or actually more often than not, is the actual missing link, is the missing piece. And in health, I've been working health for many, many years. And in health, the health education piece is always missing. And sometimes it's very simple. Just give people some clear directions, some clear instructions, and simple steps to follow. And I think that is still one thing that is missing with regards to using wearables.
Right. No, there's a certain level of friction and a certain level, I guess consistent reminder and guidance and peer influence to keep using it. It's funny because we've talked to a lot of these care management companies that manage the remote monitoring programs on the behalf of providers. And what they say is, look, 80% of what we do is call people each day, tell them to get on the scale, put on their cuff, take their blood pressure. But that is what it takes to get a program that is actually consistently adhered to and adopted. Are there any companies or techniques you've found that make it easier for a patient to, either more transparently or organically use the wearable without thinking about it, right? And get all of this benefit without necessarily someone needing to call them to remind them to get on the scale or put on the cuff?
Yeah, Chris, that would be the ideal case scenario to intuitively just use the wearable with no intrusion, but the wearable requires a personal the engagement, but also a personal intervention. I'm not talking about the external provider, a company to call the individual, but the wearable only works really well with the level of human interaction. So it's actually really, really difficult. The wearables are becoming more, more clever, if you like, because now we have patches, we have wearables in many shapes or forms. It's not just about smartwatches and fitness bands. There are trackers in many different ways, smart rings, smart belts, patches, sensors. Smart clothing is a big trend now, because the sensors can go in clothing, and so there are many ways that can be improved, but also it requires a level of intervention of human input, if you like. So I don't see a way around it yet. So
okay, got it. What are some of the questions about wearable technology that people should be asking but may not be asking as much? People like me.
Oh, wow. I would say, with regards in the industry, for example, I was talking to a few pharma companies, and they're trying to do virtual care. Clinical trials, virtual clinical trials. One of the questions that comes up very often is, it sounds very basic, but it's, what are we trying to measure? And sometimes with wearables data and wearables input, is not actually what they're directly trying to get, because sometimes it's not the activity steps or the activity data that they are after. They have to do correlation between data to try to get to a certain condition or disease management, or any relevance that perhaps that piece of health data impacts. So what we're trying to measure, is the data reliable and accurate? And with many wearables, is always a bit of a discrepancy. It can be a 10% or 20% range. So that take into consideration. But also, one of the things that I would say right from the outset is, what are we trying to accomplish, and in what realistic measures? Because we have this expectation that wearable is going to solve the problem, or wearable is going to be the miracle. The wearable will be other element to try to solve the problem, because the wearable on its own is not going to really do anything. It requires a bit of thinking around, a bit of a strategic thinking around the wearable. So, and that's one of the things that sometimes I see happening, and mistakes made by thinking, okay, we get the wearable done and we get the usage and everything will change. And it's a bit more complex than that.
Got it. And how about AI, or specifically machine learning, when combined with wearables? Like the promise seems straightforward. Eventually a computer can learn to detect signals something is wrong or coming based on a tremendous amount of data. Has anyone really realized that theoretical potential of machine learning or AI in combination with wearables?
Yeah, that's a fantastic one, Chris. I actually done a book chapter and shared my vision that the combination of the artificial intelligence and wearables will be the game changer in healthcare. And a few years ago, artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. I'm not sure if you remember, but the IBM Watson had a very popular TV show in US where
Jeopardy,
yeah, right. You remember that?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. So the IBM Watson, always beat the human being because they can process more data quicker. Very simplistically, is a computer, right? With more brain power. I think, and this is what I'm seeing now, we have both sides of the coin. We have a lot of data and we have the technology there. A few years ago, we have the artificial intelligence, but we didn't have enough data to process it. We didn't have enough data from medical data, health data from the human being. Now with that, we have both. Now I see things really starting to make sense, but also the true potential of wearables to be recognized. And there are companies now that give you, based on your, for example, behavior, if you go to bed a certain time. I use very often the Oura Ring, for example. I'm not associating any brand in any shape or form, but it gives you, for example, a reminder that your bedtime is approaching. So you might want to avoid, for example, drinking caffeine in the next 2 or 3 hours before go to bed. And that's where artificial intelligence plays a role around learning, as you mentioned, your behavior, detecting patterns, or even in certain cases to detect anomalies around more severe conditions and more serious things instead of just being normal behavior. So I believe artificial intelligence really have a big role to play combined with wearables.
Right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. And what do you think about Apple, Google or Android Fit, and these platforms? Are they going to be used as a wearable that for care delivery over time? And what is their impact on the market? Are they gatekeepers to other companies that maybe want to do innovative things on the wearable space? Or are they enablers?
Well, Chris, very, very good question. Sometimes I'm trying to figure that out myself, what they're actually trying to do, contributing to the market. For example, Amazon now, the big tech brands are very interested in health because health is a big industry. Also, every human being will have at certain age relevance around health, whether they are in your 30s or 40s or 50s, 80s. So every human being have a correlation with health. But for example, Google bought a Fitbit for a reason, because not just of the devices, but I really believe they have a big long-term game plan around the health data, perhaps even artificial intelligence, and they have plans. Amazon now, they're very interested in healthcare. So I would personally like to see them playing a more active role in actually helping people and patients directly. But I think we still seeing these dynamics appearing. For example, Amazon bought a big healthcare company, but they didn't want to enter the market yet. So these nuances are still happening, and which are slightly confusing. I actually wrote my insights around that, which are slightly confusing from an industry point of view, but also from an outside point of view. Are you actually in the market, or are we not in the market? What's the long-term strategy? And some of these companies are trying to figure out how to actually enter the marketplace and make an impact.
Right. And given, all of these big players entering the market, different modalities of wearables, and it seems like the technology is maturing, what do you think the future of wearables looks like? Or what do you think it'll look like, or what do you hope it will look like?
Oh, well, that's a fantastic question. I like that. When I do my keynotes around the world, I always kind of pitch my vision. It might be wrong, but I'll start with this. My big vision is that the wearables can change the world. And if they can change, for example, your reality with virtual reality, mixed reality, you can change your world. It doesn't mean it's a health medical world, but if they can help you to manage your condition and improve your health and wellness, they can change your world. But also, one of the things that I predict is that in 5 or 10 years' time, that the wearables that we see today will become obsolete. And it's not about fitness bands and smartwatches. It will be definitely about very small sensors, about smart clothing, about health rings, about anything that you actually fancy or goes around your taste or preferences, but not just on your wrist. That's one of my predictions. The other prediction that I have is eventually, and this is more as a prediction and also an aspiration, eventually I would like the plates to be turned upside down and the power to be given to the consumer and not the provider or the manufacturer or the insurance system. I would like to see. I have my data. I work really hard to try to stay healthy and fit. Now, what can I get in return? Can you give me a benefit? Can you give me a discount? Can you lower my premium? So I would like to see the power on the hands of the people. And I believe wearables can play a big role in that. I think we are a long, long time away from that, but that's what I really would love to see.
Right. Yeah, I hope so too. So maybe in the next iteration, we won't all be cyborgs yet and have implants. But yeah, could be coming. So you are the number one, I would say, expert in wearables and one of the top influencers in the digital health community at large. And I would love to unpack a little bit your journey and crystallize playbooks for other people, because I think it'll be helpful as more people like us are trying to enter and grow the community. How did you start building your own personal community and become an influencer within digital health?
Oh, Chris, I actually have a very personal story. I mentioned that we were doing that startup back in 2015. I always had an interest in health and wellness. And that startup was a failure. It was called Self-Care People. For one reason or another, we didn't make it happen. But what happened was, I always been a people person. As you can see, I like to talk and I like to interact with people. I started to network quite a lot. And back in 2015, I still have one of my first business cards. I had many business cards because I work in sales for a long time back in the days in Portugal, and I've done many different things. But back then, I called myself digital health influencer. And when I used to go network and give my business card out, the word influencer in 2015 was not on anyone's radar. People used to all ask me, what does that mean? And I used to say, actually, I'm an influencer. I connect people. I share the trends in the industry. I follow these new technology trends. And, even myself, I was not completely clear what an influencer would look like. Then I started to build my audience on Twitter and LinkedIn primarily in the industry. And I've been working extremely hard to try to keep up with the industry, new trends. It's not just about self-promotion. I believe it's more about collaboration and help other people bringing their innovation, for example, to the forefront, do things together, share good news, industry news, collaborate like we're doing now. I mean, I collaborate with you, you collaborate with me. And it took off from there. In a few years, I started to get noticed. One of the things that I would advise anyone to do in their own industry, in digital health, but any industry whatsoever, connect with the influencers and the stakeholders and the people that are doing. At the end of the day, whether you are a CEO of a big organization or just the startup founder that's trying to figure out and started 6 months ago, it's all about people, and it's about connecting with people, interacting with people. And perhaps that's one thing that I do well. I try to interact with people, people interact with me, and things took off from there. I started to get a bit of a following on Twitter, LinkedIn, a presence. And I don't really have like a magic formula, Chris. I'm still doing these things that I'm talking about now, trying to find the good content. As I mentioned, I shared an article from the American Heart Association about wearables. So, these things, share industry news, reliable content, collaborate with others, keep an eye on what's new, give your personal insights. All these things are still pretty much part of my daily activities, really.
Right. Your playbook hasn't changed that much. That's great to learn. And so when we talk to digital health startups, we talk about, what is a moment or a activity, reaction that lets you know you're on the right track, that either showed proof that your idea has value, or prove that you have a viable business, so product market fit. And I'm curious, in your journey as an influencer, was there any time where you thought, gosh, you know what? I've made it. Like I've crossed that chasm. And I, as a person, right, as an influencer and expert within wearables, I have a product market fit.
Great. Well, Chris, you already answered by, in terms of, I worked a lot with startups in the past, and I have my own experience. I have 2 failures on my CV, which led me, actually, the failure led me to the influencer, if you know what I mean. The failure led me to that route because I was kind of on my own figuring out what I'm going to do, and I start like doing my inroads into the industry. But one of the things that that I've learned is I have not made it as such. Yeah, this is always an ongoing. This is always an ongoing journey. Okay, I create a bit of a presence, which is brilliant, but I'm still on a path of developing my presence and everything. But what you already identified is the product market fit is important. That traction that actually gives you the validation that you are on the right track. And many startups don't get to that place for one reason or another. The industry is very difficult to crack. And I believe it will be even harder in the future because the big players will eventually, unfortunately, shrink the industry for the startups. So it will be always harder. But one of the things that I believe in hard work, but hard work on your own, on its own is not going to guarantee success. But I believe in a combination of things. Within the startups, I believe the work ethic, but also the finding out what works or not really kind of early on and be able to change it. Because one of the mistakes that I used to see in the startup world, and I've done a lot of work around startups, Chris, and people start seeing that what they're doing is not working well for one reason or another, they're not getting traction, and they're still persevering with the same strategy for a year or 2 or 3. They think, I'll give you an example. I work a lot with startups from the Nordic markets, for example. Finland, very, very good health tech, digital health people in Finland, for example. Everybody thinks they create a product they're going to sell to the insurance company, for example. There will be only one person selling to the insurance. The different products, they might be sold, yeah? The insurance, let's say, for the sake of the argument, an insurance company will buy 4 different products. This is an example. But every startup's aspiration is selling to a big insurance company. But in reality, is very difficult selling to an insurance company because of the product market fit, the startup dynamic with a big corporate, and also only one player will sell that type of product to the insurance company. So from the beginning, the digital health startups are up against it, you know, but also the founders, and I was in that position myself, always have this irrational thinking that they're going to make it that way because it's their product and because they work extremely hard and because they still believe they're going to, you know, so it's a very, there are a lot of things to consider, you know. I don't have the answer for everything, but I've been in a lot of different positions with my companies and many people's companies, and it's not always easy. The answer doesn't come to you right away. So, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, but the product market fit, finding something that works is extremely important in order to progress.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up. And we've talked to startups that are trying to make this journey with a new wearable or a new RPM wearable empowered program, and I think what they found is that, like you said, that kind of older playbook of waiting for a health plan insurance company, to buy you or pilot is something that's a lot harder to do nowadays because of same customers or, providers, if they were trying to run programs, they've been burned by the problem that you mentioned earlier, which is, hey, they did pilot a lot of programs with a lot of different wearables, and it turns out at the end of the day, patients wouldn't engage with their devices, and that the program would fall on its face without a lot of hand-holding. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what you think about new, maybe, let's say, pivots in how you go to market. So we've talked to many startups that, for example, are going to consumer first and proving first that patients will engage with their program, with their device, and knowing that, hey, that business model that used to be the one to start with, right? That may be where we end up. But what they need to see, that customer, is that patients will actually use our thing. And so they're starting there. So it's kind of the B2C to B, which is becoming one of the newer playbooks. What do you think about that?
Well, Chris, that's a very good way to do things. And actually, I learned something from you. Thank you for that. It's always like this B2B2C type of more traditional approach. Okay, we enter a provider, the provider takes it to the consumer. Yeah. The C2B2C, I have not heard much, but it's a bit of a catch-22 because generally speaking, there are of course exceptions and people doing things right away in the right way and get success straight away. But generally speaking, the consumer market is difficult to enter and to conquer. To start with, you need more money for marketing. You need to test the product. It's a bit of a catch-22. You don't have money for marketing to acquire customers. You can't really prove that you have a product that people use. And many startups find themselves in that position, And then, for one reason or another, things take a long time or take always much longer to fruition than you expect. There is no right or wrong answer in here, but for certain depends on a product, on the market, on the approach. Some strategies will be much better to go B2C, B2C to B, or even like B2B to C. It all depends. But one thing that I'm seeing now, I'm sure that you are in the industry. You heard many times that data is the new oil. And and all these things. But I think now, and data is the new currency, But one thing that I'm seeing a lot, and I'm sure you agree with this, is many strategic partnerships is through partnerships in collaboration. Big companies with small companies. Usually big companies take a bit of advantage. They just acquire, go to the market, get a specific piece of expertise. If they need a cybersecurity arm, they buy a company. It's much easier than trying to develop a solution. But I would argue that collaboration is key, and collaboration is the new currency. But it's always hard for the startups to establish strategic collaborations. It's always much easier. They got more power, the big companies, to kind of dictate the model. But collaboration is certainly key, and partnerships is the way forward. And we see that in digital health, week in, week out, more partnerships on the ground, and we've seen that perhaps companies that don't have that competitive mind anymore. They have more this collaborative, open approach, and I think that's certainly one of the things that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's just kind of too hard to do it alone. And these partnerships are becoming necessary. Do you have specific advice to wearable startups on patterns of what you think succeeds or does not beyond the partnerships?
Well, I would say I was in a development phase with an hardware company, and it took quite a while. Getting a sense of trying to break down the user barriers early on. What I really want to say with that is try to simplify the user experience as much as you can from the outset. because what the companies try to do is to develop a very robust product that takes a lot of data, does a lot of different things, and then get it to the users. I would say try to get users to use it as early as they can, even if it's just one health data metric or two, because simplifying the user experience is extremely, extremely important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Gosh, and in particular in wearables or RPM programs, what's fascinating to me is a lot of times you're creating different user experiences. There's the one that really matters, which is the patient going to engage? But then there's the provider backend or the dashboard for the insurance company or the dashboard just for the care managers. And really what's arisen is this new type of company that feels like they have to be full stack to exist. Not full stack as in layers of coding and engineering, but full stack as in something for each role and entity that's in this kind of wearable ecosystem. Gosh, what do you think about that? It seems like to me it has the potential to really raise the complexity of launching a startup if you're expected to have all of the pieces or allow your customer to mix and match what they need.
Yeah, I think, I love wearables, and, I'm an advocate of wearables. But wearables certainly naturally bring another layer of complexity. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, you got an RPM system. Okay, you're trying to get people to engage, the users to use monitoring, or the clinicians to use it, to the patients. Wearables bring another layer of complexity. They bring another dynamic. They bring one more thing that you will eventually change the dynamic of the operation. You will add more people. They would add more faults. They would add more things that don't work the way we expect. And I think managing expectations is one thing that we don't take not serious, but we don't consider from the outset. But the other thing is that it's not a good practice to try to cover lots of aspects at the same time. Perhaps focus on one thing at a time and then roll out the other elements as we go along. What a lot of wearable companies tend to do is they try to cover lots of aspects and try to be experts in all these things at the same time. And then all of a sudden they find themselves a bit disappointed because it's such an impossible task. And you describe it. So is one very common challenge.
Got it. Yeah, or maybe, use partnerships or existing platforms for the stuff that is not necessarily your unique value proposition. And if your unique value proposition is founded on patients actually engaging with your thing, focus your energy there, as you mentioned. So about half our audience is people either working at or starting up their own digital health startup. So I'd like to end by asking, really, is there anything specifically that you wanted to share that you haven't gotten to about either wearables or just your advice as they're about to embark on a journey that you've been on and are helping people through today?
Well, sure. I think I already shared a little bit on, let's say, making the right noise, identifying, mapping out the marketplace, identifying who is who, doing what, and connect with people. Okay, Chris, you got an amazing company. I'm going to follow Chris, get one eye on what Chris is doing, how he's helping companies. I think connecting with the different stakeholders in the industry is certainly very, very important. And I have my YouTube channel, Chris. You know that I interview all the big guys in medicine and healthcare, and I have exciting things coming up. So everybody, please keep an eye on that. But also creating a strategic marketing thinking around, no matter how small or big you are, because everybody starts from 0 followers. You have to make a start. I think on Twitter, for example, I was getting very discouraged. The first year or two, I had less than 1,000 followers. I was expecting to, okay, I'm going to go on Twitter and every day I post 2 or 3 things and get hundreds of followers. And it doesn't work like that. He is a very slow burner, slow process. Eventually, by persevering, I created an audience and I break the 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. I think now I've got 25 or 26,000 on Twitter. But it's been, Chris, it's been over 10 years. It's not like he's not a quick fix, So perseverance, persistence, of course, but connect with others. There were influencers before. Connect with other people because they all catapult you to a different place, and they will help you in some shape or form. The other thing is, one thing that I've learned, and this applies to startups but also to business in general, is that it might take 5, 6, 7 years for a company to mature not into a multi-million-pound company, but even to get some kind of success. So what we expect in the startup world is 1 year or 2 years ago, a product, 3 years. We expect things to just ramp up in the first 3 years. Oh, if it doesn't work, it's a failure. But it takes a good 6, 7 years to get to like a maturity status, at least. So don't give up too early. Make sure that you kind of are on the right track. But there are no rights or wrongs in here, Chris. Every company is different. Some people grow very, very big in 2 years. Some people take 12 years and they're still trying to figure out the marketplace. But yeah, I've been doing many things, and I've seen many companies to have this unrealistic expectation that they should be very successful in 3 years if they know they're not going anywhere.
Especially if they know, digital health.
Right. It's a very dynamic. The digital health is a very peculiar industry. It's like this expectation of things ramp up very quick. It's like a speed to market, and unfortunately, healthcare is slow. Health is slow. Human beings are, very faulty. So the digital health is a very bumpy ride, unfortunately.
Right. Well, we're happy to be on that ride with people like you. And speaking of connections, João, thank you so much for connecting with us and coming on the podcast. We're huge fans and aspire to learn from people like you how to do our part in building a digital health community. And really, thanks for all that you do.
Oh, Chris, thanks for having me. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks for listening to this podcast and being a part of this movement. This podcast is brought to you by Persimmon Health, an offering by Leapfrog Technology that's purpose-built to help innovators imagine, build, and scale digital health products. We're passionate about fixing healthcare and have worked on over 50 digital health products. If you want to share your story or want to work together, please shoot an email to hello@persimmonhealth.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.